Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 238 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. The FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions, your one-stop shop for all things FCPA compliance related. Today I have with me John Allen. John is the President and CEO of G&A Partners. This is a company that does work in the human resources space, and John has some very interesting thoughts that I've felt could help the compliance practitioner in thinking through not only how to prevent reputational damage to your company, but also how you can use the HR function and HR concepts in your compliance program, particularly around the touch points that a company, or rather an HR department, has with an employee, and how you can insert compliance messages at each one of those touch points. The episode comes in at just over 18 minutes. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much for listening. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and welcome to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today, I have a very interesting guest with me because, for a couple of reasons. One, he's an interesting guy, but more importantly, he works in a field, not in the compliance field, but I took a look at some of the things he and his company do, and they really touch the compliance world quite a bit, and I thought it would be interesting to have John Allen, the President and CEO of G&A Partners, come on board and talk to us a little bit about the work his company does in the HR field. So, John, with that introduction, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to visit with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
John, one of the things your company does is assist other companies in not only in the HR function, but frankly in helping them not have reputational damage to the HR function. How is that a concept that you can get across to your clients, or how do you guys go about doing that?
Well, I would tell you that for any small business owner, any business owner for that matter, having an outstanding reputation in the marketplace is paramount to your success. I know it has been for us, and our first core value is unquestionable integrity. And so we want to maintain an outstanding reputation, especially with social media being as pervasive as it is today. So as an HR outsourcing firm, we really help our clients right from the get-go in terms of hiring people that will really contribute in a positive way to their business, people that won't complain, people that won't do shoddy work, people that won't be difficult to manage, but instead people that will be a positive reflection of the organization. Then the other thing we try to do is to eliminate bad HR practices so that the good people that are hired are managed well, treated fairly, compensated appropriately, so that when they talk about their experience working for a particular employer, the comments they make are positive. And improve the brand of their employer as opposed to distract from the brand. We also try to make sure that the policies are consistently applied so that there are no favorites, because that can also damage an organization's reputation when one person is treated differently than another.
No, John, if I just took HR or hiring out and inserted compliance, I think you would find yourself preaching to a very, very large and vocal choir of all of those things you said. I think most lawyers understand that the HR world is very heavily regulated, and lots of paperwork, lots of policies and procedures, and you have your own regulatory scheme that the Department of Labor runs. So one of the services that your company provides is an HR audit. Could you describe what that is, what you do, and then how you work with a client with the final product, whatever you come up with?
Sure. When we bring on a new client, the first thing that we do out of the gate is to have HR advisors on our staff go out and basically look at all the HR policies, procedures, forms, files, to make sure that our clients are complying with the law. And we look at all the different aspects of HR, from hiring to compensation to management, and determinations, just to make sure that everything is being done in strict compliance with the law, and in a way, going back to your previous question, that builds the reputation of the company as an outstanding employer. Those HR advisors will spend a couple days in the client location looking through all kinds of documentation. They'll meet with a number of different people asking questions. As they compile information about how certain things are done, then in their interviews with people, they'll make sure that that's what's actually being done, that people aren't deviating from that. And then once they've done all that field work, they'll come back and prepare a written report. That report will identify the areas where clients are doing well, because we believe that before we can be critical of a client and point out their weaknesses, that we also have to let them know what they're doing right. So we tell them what they're doing right, and we tell them what they're doing wrong. We try to help them to understand the consequences of what may happen if they don't correct or address the weaknesses, both in terms of legal liability, reputational damage, etc. And so that written report then becomes the basis of a formal presentation to the client, hopefully the creation of an action plan so that we can make those weaknesses disappear and perhaps even become strengths.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'd never considered in a risk assessment, is to point out the things that they're doing right or even outstanding. And that's not something that probably lawyers think about enough. So that's a really good insight. I'm definitely going to take that one to the bank.
Well, I learned that by being a father. You know, if you're constantly criticizing your children without telling them all the good things that they do, they can kind of get a misconception of how you feel towards them. So we want to point out both the good and the bad.
That's a great analogy, and hopefully one. It's been my experience that everyone has either been a parent or a child, so I think they'll understand it. John, one of the things that's important in the FCPA world is training on a company's anti-corruption policies and procedures and codes of conduct. And the Department of Justice mandates that you must train, and I think most companies certainly understand that. But now we're seeing the Department of Justice talk more about they want to see results of the effectiveness of your training. And I know that's one of the things that your company helps businesses with. How do you help a company either measure effectiveness or think through how training might be effective, or what might your approach be to that? If I came to you and said, how can you help me to show the effectiveness of my training?
You know, in our particular situation, the majority of our clients don't have a formal training program. They do a lot of on-the-job training, but they really haven't thought beyond that. So oftentimes we're stepping in to help them create a more formal training program where we identify the core competencies that their people need to have, go out and find content so that we can deliver that content to the employees either through online training tools or in-person classes and workshops. But just delivering content doesn't mean that the content's being absorbed or even making a difference. So we add to our service offering an e-learning tool that actually tracks whether employees have completed the training and how they did in terms of the competency test at the end of the training program. So, for example, if we were to give a group of supervisors training on how to effectively and fairly terminate an employee, at the end of that training there would be a series of questions that would be asked. They've got to respond to. It gets scored, and the score gets added to the e-learning tool so that the owner of that business can see, okay, who's completed that training and how did everybody do. And then in addition to that, we build into the performance evaluation process an aspect of that is professional development. And so we measure, as part of their performance evaluation and their annual raises, how effectively they've taken classes, how well they did they complete everything that was required, and then you ask open-ended questions to see how they benefited from that. The last thing that we do, and we do it internally here at G&A Partners as well, is we survey our employees through a Net Promoter Score and ask them to evaluate us. And that score, typically what they do is they evaluate us, but in the process they evaluate our training, they evaluate our trainers, and so we get valuable feedback through that survey tool that helps us then to tweak our training program and improve it over time.
John, one of the things that really struck me was when I was researching your company and your website is you have a circular chart on your website. And it, to me, was an incredibly useful visual display of the human resources performance and talent management services that not only your company can provide, but what I saw in it from my perspective is every touch point HR would have with an employee. And from the anti-corruption compliance perspective, that seems to me to be an opportunity to help educate and reinforce the message of doing business ethically and in compliance. And people are going to be hearing this, and not going to see this circular chart. But I was wondering if you could just walk us through it, because each one of the categories you have, I think, can be very useful for a anti-corruption compliance practitioner thinking through exactly that. Where can I have a touch point with my employees, and how can I have HR help me burn the message of doing business ethically and in compliance in the DNA of my company?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The chart is it's a circular chart with each phase of the employment cycle as part of that a pie, if you will, a piece of the pie of that chart. And so it begins with it's kind of a hire to fire type chart, from planning, sourcing, recruiting, all the way through the offboarding of an employee, either through termination or retirement. And then on the outside of that chart are three key words, certainly key to us: people, process, and technology. You've probably heard the song, "It's all about the base, it's all about the base." From our perspective, it's all about the people. And compliance and everything that really has to do with operating a successful business begins with having the right people in place, applying consistent processes in the work that they do, and then using technology in each one of those steps to maximize efficiency and to provide, again, those outstanding people with easy-to-use technology that makes information easy to retrieve. But in going through the slices of the pie, and it begins with planning, so you certainly have to address what kind of resources that you need, how many, what kind of backgrounds. Sourcing is identifying where you find the candidates and making sure that you're casting your net broadly enough to where your people reflect the diversity of the community, and that you're not excluding anybody, which obviously would be a very dramatic non-compliance issue. Recruitment is all about selling your brand, the interview process, background investigations, drug testing, etc. And then you go through the onboarding process. We use an online onboarding process so that people can input their critical information from anywhere. And it makes sure that, again, from a compliance perspective, that everybody is looking at the same forms, providing the same information. Once people are on board, then we focus on capturing time, getting them paid properly, evaluating their performance, and not waiting to evaluate performance just once a year like was the old tradition,
right.
But giving constant feedback. And that really begins by setting expectations up front in writing so that employees, especially new employees, know exactly what will be expected of them, how they will be evaluated, so that comments that come down the line don't surprise them. Well, I didn't realize I was supposed to do that. So we try to begin the performance evaluation process really during the hiring process by setting proper expectations then. And then the chart moves to succession planning and development, which again gets into the training or learning that we talked about earlier, and helping people to see where they can move within the organization and the kinds of things they have to do to progress. Compensation is the next piece of the pie, making sure, again, from a compliance perspective, that people are being paid fairly, given their backgrounds, their tenure, their education, and that compensation doesn't vary by gender or race or any other protected class. And then the last piece of the pie is the offboarding process. And if for whatever reason things haven't worked out, is making sure that you can humanely part company with somebody and help them become successful someplace else.
I can't emphasize enough to you how powerful that is for my world in demonstrating to a compliance practitioner how you can have a touch point with employees, how HR can assist you in doing that, and it's also the people, process, and technologies component is equally powerful in communicating the messages of how you can do that, how you can have those touch points, what can you bring to help people to understand all of this. John, if I could maybe wrap it up or move towards the end with a question I really want to ask you, and it's how can HR policies and procedures help a company to build an ethical organization? And I don't mean moralist and, we're all angels, but I mean ethical in a business world, in a business setting, along the lines of integrity your company has and that you've talked about. How can HR help build that culture?
Well, I think the best way for an organization to demonstrate ethical behavior is to be completely transparent with its employees. And one way to be transparent is to make sure that HR policies are spelled out in writing in a handbook or some other medium that's available to all of an organization's employees. So again, they have ready access to be able to look and see exactly how the company will deal with various situations and circumstances. By putting HR policies in writing and making those policies available to the masses, so to speak, it also then puts the onus on the business operation to apply those procedures consistently and fairly in every circumstance. And that way, they're precluded from playing favorites or making exceptions or skirting the rules because the transparency and putting things in writing really holds them to a higher standard.
Well, John, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. If someone wanted to contact you to find out a little more information on G&A Partners or follow up on anything you've said in this podcast, could they do so, or better yet, how would they do so?
Well, they can always go to our website, www.gnapartners.com, or a microsite that we have built into that called $1,000,000employee.com. And they can always call our main number, too, and ask for me. I'd be happy to talk to any of your listeners. The main number is 713-784-1181.
So this is Tom Fox, and I've been visiting today with John Allen, the President and CEO of G&A Partners, a HR outsourcing and resourcing company. And he has given us some very interesting ideas that hopefully the compliance practitioners who are listening to this might take and really help to understand how HR can help in compliance. So, John, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us, and I
Look forward to continuing the conversation.